The drone I've got here is a little 2 inch.
The first place to start would be to plug in your drone to Betaflight and share your screen if you could. So, and I'll ask you a couple of questions while you're doing that. So, have you actually flown this at all since the rebuild? Like, is it working now?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
So the first thing I would do is probably just start from the top, working your way down the tabs. Now, I don't look at all of them, but I would go to the configuration for sure. I'm going to assume that you have your ports and that all set up fine. And the first question I would have is why are you going 8K, 4K on the PID loop? Now, it's a possibility you need to, but it's not a given. So I would probably try to put that in 8K. And my guess is when you do that, it wants to bump back down to 4K. I'll show you why
Um,
that's the case.
yeah, sure. I think I remember I dropped it down to 4K because I think the processor was getting a bit overwhelmed and it was
Fair enough.
performed
Fair
very
enough.
odd
Yeah.
manner.
Just want to be sure. Okay. It does go into to 8K. I see. So you're at 61%. So, it's questionable whether that would be a problem or not, but it's probably not a bad idea to go to 4K. You're probably right. I would probably do that. Yeah.
No
Just
worries.
wanted to try it just to be sure. Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough.
Also, I mean, I know you know this, Brian, but I know I didn't really notice this until recently. I think it's 4.5 that did this. Maybe it was 4.4, but like when you change to D shot 300, it automatically
Yeah,
shoots you.
that's right. It does.
Yeah.
It automatically. Some people can't wonder why they can't switch to 8K there. Sometimes depends on your D shot setting. That's what Troy is saying there. Okay, but you're
Yeah.
good there. So go to your configuration again. I would recommend one little thing.
Mhm.
See down there your maximum arm angle. I would make that 180. What that means is the maximum angle that the drone would be allowed to arm. And the reason for that is like if you put the drone on a hill and you wanted
Yep.
to arm it, you wouldn't have been able to arm in that case, right? It's only
Makes sense.
because of angle mode. So just be aware that if you are on a really steep angle and you're in angle mode, it's going to want to instantly bring it up to level, right? So, but
Right.
it's good to have that ability to arm at any angle. So go ahead and save and reboot. And then we'll bump right on down. I would go right down to the motors tab for a second. Yeah, just to double check all that. Okay. So you have 12 motor poles. So you confirm that for sure?
Yes, I
Okay.
believe so.
We'll assume that's right then. There's little tiny motors. So most motors, pointing to the motor poles here, most motors have 14 motor poles, or I should say most of the motors that FPV drones use typically have 14. On occasion, you'll see really tiny motors that tend to be 12 motor poles, and sometimes larger motors as well. I've even seen some larger motors that are like 24 motor poles. It's important to get that right, or else your RPM filters won't work right. So that's good. That's good. And you can see that information is actually usually posted on the site where you purchase your motors.
Yeah.
You'll
I
see
think
that.
I have confirmed there from memory.
Okay, good stuff. Okay, so now let's go on back then to your PID tuning tab. Let's take a glance, make sure everything is relatively safe here. So you're not defaults here. So if you don't mind, would it be okay to go back to defaults? You could
100%.
pick a profile. You could change the profile if you want.
There's nothing really here worth keeping.
Okay, well, probably just for simplicity and for avoiding confusion, I would start with profile one as your main one.
Yeah.
It's up to you, but there you go, and you're all defaulted there anyway. Okay, so that's good, and save that. Go to your filter settings after that, and we'll take a look. So,
Hey,
under
Brian.
most circumstances, a 3 inch to a 5 inch, you should be able to start at the defaults, and the same thing here. I would default the filters as well. So
Mhm.
that's your defaults. Now the only question you got to ask yourself is whether your RC link is set up. That's the first thing you want to do before you do anything. So are you using ELRS or Crossfire, and what's the rate that you're using?
Yeah, ELRS is what I'm using. I don't recall what I've set everything to though.
Okay. Well, easy enough to see it. So in your radio, if you go through the radio pages, you should see.
Yeah, I think I'm in the setting now. Which one are you looking for exactly? The
So the packet rate, I think it's called.
Yeah, 250 hertz.
250 hertz. Okay, fair enough. And that's a fine rate. That's going to give you 4 millisecond packets.
Cool.
Okay, so what you're going to do is go into your presets. You're going to go to the drop down here, and you see your RC link. And then you're going to type in ELRS, and that'll shrink up the amount of options you have there. So your ELRS 250. So you're simply clicking that and picking the option you want here. Now, personally, I try to avoid going too far into cinematic, ultra cinematic, but it's up to yourself right here. You can't go wrong by picking the middle of the road here. What you're going to find is as you move more towards the ultra cinematic setting that they call it here, that's basically more and more RC smoothing and more smoothing on the feed forward. So it's going to add delay of this on the sticks, right?
Hey, Brian, this is where I was talking about when you add this preset, a lot of people don't recognize that this only applies to profile that you're on. So if you want to add this preset to all 4 profiles, you either have to copy profile 1 after.
You're telling me the RC smoothing is
Apply
actually
this
specific
profile
to
and go to the receivers tab and check the settings on all 3 profiles. And I promise you, the feed forward settings do not copy over to all.
feed forward settings. Yes, that's right.
Which this affects the feed forward settings.
That's right.
I have a question.
Yeah.
If you've done your tuning with this profile, is there a way in PID Toolbox to see what setting you have actually used?
It's possible. I mean, you'll be able to see what RC packet rate you have. You can see that if you plot the spectrum.
You can see the differences, though, in the setup info. So you can definitely spot the issue.
If I can have a question, I was thinking about this as well. Like when I found out that this fine tuning on feed forward is different between the profiles. When, for example, I'm using the Nomad module right now, and with the crossband 150 and 250 LRS sometimes. So they are like 2 different, let's say, packet rates and frequencies. So if you have any tips on how to optimize or how to set up for switching between like the packet rates on the same build. Because sometimes I use 2.4 and sometimes I use the crossband for longer range. And I'm not sure like how to optimize the feed forward setting or between the profiles, because I switch between 2 profiles based on what I fly.
So you're talking about a difference between using 2.4 versus like 900 megahertz or something?
Kind of, yeah. The Nomad.
But the packet rate is this held constant?
No, it's 150. It's maximum in crossband, and 500 or 250 in the 2.4. And I'm not sure
different.
What should I go with.
You have to have a different RC link setup. It's a different RC link.
Couldn't you just run auto in that situation, though? It wouldn't be ideal, obviously, but it's better than setting it to a specific rate if he's...
So that's true. The auto setting can be used, but it only applies to the RC smoothing parameters in the receiver tab. But what it won't do is it won't set up the appropriate feed forward settings because this is, as we said, is profile dependent. So if you decide you want to switch between, say, 50 hertz and 500 hertz, you'd have to set up 2 separate profiles with different feed forward settings, because at 500 hertz, you're probably going to need higher jitter reduction, for example, than you would at 50 hertz or 100 hertz.
The Nomad stuff is new. And I'll be honest, the ELRS stuff, man, is really tough to understand because, like, I don't understand which receivers are different because, like, some receivers don't do 50 hertz. Some don't do 100. Some don't do 150. So I have an issue sometimes just trying to...
ELRS does all of that, though, doesn't it? I mean,
I've got certain receivers that they'll do 100 but not 150. Or they'll do
okay. I've not seen that.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know enough about.
There's a lot of different hardware out there with the LRS, and I don't know, to be honest. It's
anyway. Sorry to detract.
It's a bit of a trap for people, and I think people do get a little confused from it, and I can understand it.
Yeah, because on the same build I was using like the crossband for one profile and the regular 250 for like the other profile, and then I said like, well, how should I like really optimize the RC link between these two like different kind of setups, right?
Yeah.
Same build, and I wasn't sure like how to set it up, so I kept it on
personally,
auto
I wouldn't use auto. Okay, why? This is not going to be maybe useful information for you, but for me, what I don't like about auto is I don't know what it's doing. But that's not a good answer. I get it. Um,
One word of caution: don't go below in the fine tuning selection. Don't go below HD freestyle because you will get a very long delay with that smoothing, and if you don't know that, you fly your quad will fly like a drunken chicken or something
well,
because
it
it's
won't
so
affect the
smooth.
quads. No. Let's be clear. It won't
Not
affect the
not
quads flying.
no, not that,
It'll
but the
affect the
reaction.
delay between you and the input.
Right,
Yeah,
that's what I wanted to say. Yeah,
fair enough. Fair
correct.
enough.
In which settings?
When you go to the preset,
The fine tuning.
the fine tuning, you have to. So you have racing, freestyle, and HD freestyle. I never go below HD freestyle because then
You mean cinematic?
yeah, right. Then
Guys,
you're
can
like
I
you just
propose something here? Because we're not going to get past this. Why don't we? This is valuable. I'm going to
Yeah,
get you to share your screen again.
sure.
And we'll do a couple of tests with the RC, and I'm going to show you exactly what Axel.
AX. Yeah, right.
Okay, we're going to test what Axel said because this is really valuable. Let's start by going to Black Box, and we're going to set up the debug mode that's going to allow you to see set point before RC smoothing is added, and then we'll be able to compare it to the set point after your RC smoothing. PID Toolbox will calculate the actual delay between the two.
Also, while he's doing that, I do think, Brian, I think that the test that I think some of us may want to like that I was talking about we could set up is I'd love to understand like those differences between like because I have a Nomad module that I'm using on setting up when clients want dual band setups.
Yeah.
I would love to do some testing around how to manage and how to best handle the different links and like seeing the differences of their like frequencies. So like I have a build that I could technically set up with like 3 or 4 different receivers on 3 different UARTs, and we could really easily and quickly switch between them and see the differences between like a dual band Gemini setup running or cross whatever. There's so many settings.
So just to be clear, so it doesn't matter what the power is. I don't like no nothing that we do here is gonna matter whether you're using dual band or whatever. Like
the way that Nomad handles those frequency changes, they like he said, 900 will be like limited to certain certain refresh rates, and the 2.4 is different refresh rates.
right,
Like
right.
how to see how that affects something on the bench, or even in flight, would be interesting to see the differences in how changing those different smoothing settings could help or change things.
In dual band, it's always 150 on both. If you use dual band,
But it's the cross
if you try
band,
to use,
right? It's
if you
cross
try to
band
use
that's
800 and 2.4, it's always 150 on both.
But it's the packet rate is all that matters, unless that's dynamically changing, which I would recommend don't do that. Like don't use a dynamically changing packet rate if you can avoid it.
It's locked to
Right?
150, yeah.
Can anybody give me a good reason why you'd want a dynamically changing packet rate? Because that's where the problem with that is that even if you allow Betaflight to automatically detect that, it's going to change mid-flight. And when it does that, for a certain period of time, you're going to have the wrong RC smoothing. Because it takes time for Betaflight to then, several loops, it'll detect, oh, it's changed to 150 hertz. Now we got to change the smoothing. But in that short period of time, and if you look through any log file of people that have done that, you'll notice that periods in the log file, the RC signal starts to look all janky.
So can you give us a big picture of what this RC would mean for the PIDs?
Oh,
Just kind of like
well, it's the input to the system. So let's get some data because it'll be
Okay.
easier to describe this when you're looking at data. So, Dimitri, if you could, just with your props off, all you have to do is arm and just go back and forth on your roll stick. Right, left, right, left, right, left. And just do it 4 or 5 times is all you need.
No worries.
And then what we'll do is we'll go back in and we'll set your preset to like the ultra cinematic or something like that. But it'd be nice to know, for example, that what's the difference between picking the racing on the one end versus the ultra cinematic on the other. And I bet it's pretty damn dramatic to the point where people kind of shrug their shoulders and don't really know. If I was going to give a rule of thumb, I'd probably say pick the middle of the road, which is HD freestyle. That's probably the safe bet. But then if I had certain clients like that were hardcore racers and they wanted ultra fast, then obviously you're going to err on the other side, right? But I wouldn't blindly just apply it. I would apply it and then look at the quality of the F term. So what I want to teach you, probably the best thing I could do, is to teach you how to analyze it in black box, how to analyze the quality of your RC signal and your feed forward signal. That's probably way more valuable information. Then you can select what you want and make a better decision. So in part, step one here is doing that. So go ahead and send those log files, but in the meantime, I'm going to get... Okay, Timon, the floor is yours.
We were talking about the different frequencies of the crossband ELRs, and this describes which frequencies can be used in the
I see.
different
So it's
things.
just a list of available packet rates for the given system.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it describes that.
It doesn't tell you anything about what
age.
RC smoothing settings you should use or anything like that.
This
No,
does help me
it was a
understand,
question
though, what
if it's changing during the flight or not. And as I see it, it only works with every column is the connected values are the same. So I think if you use crossband, then you still have a static rate.
This is actually super helpful. This answers what I was trying to figure out earlier that I've been confused about. So apparently it's not the receiver that's dictating the ability to go into specific refresh rates. It's that Bandit in particular does not have 150. Do you see that?
Yeah.
That's the difference. So, and I think Bandit is what's integrated, the same board is what's integrated into my Boxer. So this goes back to the confusion is the radio and what's integrated into it and or the module you're using is actually what's dictating the ability to switch to certain refresh rates. Do you see that? Am I correct in understanding that? I think that's what I'm saying.
As I understand, yeah, you are right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because 150 is not available on Bandit.
But why does it matter? I don't understand what
because I seem to find this randomly and I've never been able to explain it, but it makes sense because I use multiple radios and multiple modules. Like one of my main ELRS radio is my Boxer with it built in, but I also have like micro modules and other radios that don't have ELRS built in, and I've got a Nomad module that I use. So this makes sense as to when I'm changing modules, I'm seeing different refresh rates available. That was a confusion I had. So
see.
thank you, whoever shared that.
I see. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not familiar with those different modules. Like I've never heard of like Nomad. But again, what matters for the sake of how you set up Betaflight is the same. What I know less about is the reliability of the packets, though, too. There was a lot of discussion back when this was first starting, and they were implementing different types of filtering on the RC signal. There was a lot of talk about the quality of the signal, but okay, ultra cinematic racing. I'm gonna put them in order. Start with racing.
We already see the difference.
You do, don't you? Yeah, look at that difference. Okay, so let's just plot R and we can look at this. Yeah, okay. So this looks pretty good. So what you're looking at here is, let me change the scale a bit.
No filtering.
No, we're going to zoom in on it and you'll see what's going on there. Okay.
Very, very close.
Yeah. So the pink is your pre-filtered set point. So there's your steps, and then the red is with the smoothing. Okay. Now we can measure the delay of this using the cross correlation. I will look at that in a minute, but let's take a look then at HD Freestyle and see what we get. So HD Freestyle, you can see the delay, right? Right.
Very interesting.
If you want to guesstimate that, you'd probably come halfway between one of these. You know, you got to try to think of a signal going down in between those steps, right? So something like that.
That's the one I like the best.
So you're looking at 9 milliseconds there.
Oh.
And then if we go to ultra cinematic, let's see what we got here.
Wow.
Now, what's the value in this, right? What the value in this is, look at how
That will surprise you, that because that's a huge delay.
that's a huge delay, right? Yeah.
Wow.
40
Wow.
milliseconds.
Jeez.
Okay.
That's pretty eye-opening, right?
But
Now,
that's what proves his point, right? Is it does feel completely
you
different.
feel
Oh, yes.
disconnected.
It
Absolutely.
really does make you. I almost crashed a build
Yeah.
buying it because I was like, this just like it's even stupider, like even more dumbed down than when we slow the rates down for like wobble testing. It's so
No.
crazy. Anyways, that's
So,
why.
so if you want to know then how to do this, so now that you've used RC interpolation, that's what this is. So when you see set point smoothing delay, what it's going to do is the cross correlation lag for that signal. Now, remember, the debug mode is only putting that signal on the roll axis. I'm not sure I don't think it's doing it on the other axis. It's putting something else in there. So ignore pitch and yaw. Okay. So when you're doing this and you want to check out your own RC signal, make sure you're only looking at roll. You're only moving the roll axis and that's all you're looking at. And then when you come over here to your spectrogram,
Awesome.
you're gonna select RC set point smoothing delay, and you're only going to examine this. Okay, this is
Brian,
meaningless.
remind me, what's the debug? Is this just RC smoothing debug?
It's RC_interpolation.
Interpolation. All right, thank you.
Yeah.
I wasn't here for that. I walked away. Sorry.
Yeah, RC interpolation. And then you can see this is probably a more accurate index of the actual delay between them. So it's pretty informative, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so, and boy, it's dramatic, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's
definitely.
very tempting to select that in that preset because, I'm going to do ultra cinematic flying. I'm going to select that. And then you start your drawing and think, what the heck is going on?
Yes.
You can't actually point back to the preset because you've done a lot of stuff in between.
And it's going to be in the mind of the novice. They're going to look at that and probably go, ooh, ultra cinematic. I want ultra cinematic. Who doesn't want ultra
That's
cinematic?
the point. That's
Right?
exactly
You're
the
thinking
point.
in terms of your videography, but then when they go to fly, they're going to go, oh shit, what the hell's happening? But in essence, I've actually discussed this kind of thing with a lot of clients who I've said, like, suppose you don't want to use something like gyroflow, but you want to really create that illusion of really ultra smooth. Then something like that ultra cinematic might not be a bad idea. Obviously, you have to be using it in a space where you have the ability to still control it, because it's going to be tough to control. But you can imagine that if you take all the edges off of that set point, think about this, right? What you're ultimately doing in the end with this ultra cinematic thing is ignoring the delay component. You've removed all the edges of the input, like all those little jittery things from your thumb. They're gone. They're gone, right? So when you fly, it's gonna. Imagine when you look at Real Steady Go. What does it look like? It looks like as if your input is like all the edges are gone. I mean, if you had something in real time creating something akin to Real Steady Go, it'd feel like this too. When people say, you're trying to collect some good smooth video, and they would say, well, set your rates nice and slow. It's not the only parameter. Like, you want to look at RC smoothing as a tool to potentially help create smooth footage as well. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, maybe this ultra cinematic is a step too far. Fair enough, right? You could bring it back from that, but I wouldn't rule it out. There might be situations where it could be an interesting tool to use, right? And I doubt people have really utilized it. Most likely, people who try it get so scared away that they just don't bother again. But
Yeah, I can definitely see the
questions
application.
about that or comments about that.
I just want to say thank you. I think this was, I know we set off on a course to do something else and we got sidetracked, but I think this was some of the most valuable stuff that I've seen. I've understood now. So thank you. That's all I have to say.
Yeah. I think it's at least you know how to do this. So I've never really made a big deal about this RC underscore interpolation. Now, I mean, one thing I haven't talked about here though is the effect of this on feed forward as well. So that's something to consider. So while the racing setting looks pretty decent in terms of your actual RC signal, it'd be interesting to see how feed forward looks. And we can look at it. Oh, nice. Okay. So you're looking at F term here. We got an opportunity to do this. This brown signal is your actual F term. I'm going to turn off for a moment the pre-filtered. Actually, maybe I'll even turn off the set point and keep on the debug. Yeah. So what you're looking at now, I'm going to have to bring this scale down a bit, but what you're looking at is your F term.
Yes,
So
we
as
see
you
that.
move the sticks around, is your F right here, right? So this actually doesn't look too bad, to be honest. And that's probably because of the way it sets up that jitter. But it'd be an interesting experiment to play with, though you have to be careful. But if you were to reduce the feed forward jitter, right, then you would see spikes, a lot of sharp spikes in here. You do have to be careful because those spikes are actually going into the PID sum and then out to the motors. So it's not an experiment that I necessarily recommend you doing blindly. But if you want to know what it does to your feed forward and the quality of the feed forward, then just plot your F term, right? And then you can look at that signal. It should look like a normal signal. If you see in it a bunch of spikes, you know that you probably need to do some better smoothing on that.
Hey, I was just messing around watching you guys do this, and I went to a profile that I didn't have nothing on, and I've been switching. I've got Crossfire 50 on the drone that I have hooked up right now, and I was switching back and forth between the racing HD and the ultra smooth cinematic to see what it would do to the RC smoothing settings. And on racing, it went to auto, and on HD and ultra smooth, it went to back to manual.
Yeah.
So it's switching from manual to auto, even on the same on the 50 hertz.
I see that. Yeah. We were just discussing that. That's something we noticed as well, that obviously it was a choice of the person who created the preset. And
this is very eye-opening. I appreciate this meeting.
oh, no problem.
This is also my first Zoom meeting ever in the history of Hillbilly.
I've seen you post a bit lately. You're familiar. You've been posting a bit in the Discord lately, I think, right?
Yeah. Well, in the
That's right.
yeah, in the Patreon.
In the Patreon, right? Okay, yeah.
I haven't got on the Discord yet.
Fair enough. Yeah, so it is interesting that the same, whoever is creating a given preset, that they would do that, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's a negative, right? It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just
another-
something to keep in mind.
It's very eye-opening.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
If you want to see in advance what it does, you can select the preset and then you select all the options you want to have, and then you just select Show CLI.
Yeah.
And then
Yes.
you see what it does exactly. And it's in multiple portions. The top is mostly global settings and resetting things. And then it gets more specific down there in dependency of the options you have selected.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
And if you switch now to something else in options, it will actually change the CLI. And if you're a bit familiar with the parameters, because they're
mm,
named the same as in the Betaflight user interface,
yeah,
so you can see what it does.
correct.
Yeah.
If you want to see something else as a debug axis, you can actually set the debug axis from roll to pitch or yaw, whatever you want. It's just in
That's
there.
right. Now, it kind of doesn't matter because whatever smoothing you have is going to be applied to all axes, right? But what you're saying is you can set that in the CLI, right? Basically, what Axel's saying is the debug variable in Betaflight, where we put certain things to look at, right? There's only so many channels in it. There's 8 channels to work with, and so it's actually there used to be only 4. And so you couldn't put all the information from all axes across there, right? Because you just didn't have enough channels to do it. So in Betaflight, you have this function called gyro filter debug axis. And what that does is it specifies which axis the given debug mode is going to apply to. By default, it's set up to apply to roll.
So when we were going through the settings, we've established that some modes get set to auto or manual. If a mode gets set to auto, would you then change it back to manual immediately or leave it as auto?
For a newcomer to the hobby, just leave it. For anybody that's new to the hobby, is not sure about this, just select your preset and go with it.
Roll with it. Yep.
Roll
Okay.
with it.
That's cool.
And
Yeah.
we're giving you enough information from this little video to let you know that ultra cinematic is going to generate a lot of delay. So
Yeah, for sure.
use discretion there, right? And also keep in mind that ultra cinematic for whoever made that one, which was probably Chris Thompson, might be different than, for example, Limon's ultra cinematic on the 50 hertz crossbar preset. Don't assume they're the same, you know. But if you need to test it and you want to know what it's doing, you can do what we did here today.
Makes sense. Yeah.
If you want to nerd out, or you can just select middle of the road and say a Hail Mary and go have some fun.
Yeah. Fair enough. There'd be another question then. I'm not going to lie. You just taught me what that was. I did not know I had to set that ever. I literally just got my first LRS controller probably about a month ago. So I guess my question is, would the default setting then for someone who just completely overlooked it, would that, if it's set wrong, populate as, let's say, gyro noise when it's actually, caused by the controller being set wrong?
Can you expand a bit on what you're asking? So can you rephrase
So
that?
essentially,
Yeah.
So essentially what I'm saying is if someone had set their RC link incorrectly as we did it, would it then make a gyro look like it was performing worse than what it actually should be?
It could, definitely.
Okay.
Wouldn't you
right.
get frequency noise at the packet rate?
Yep.
Yeah. Usually where that's going to be, so I think I talked a little bit about that, but might not have been super clear. Where the problem really arises, the really bad one is high RC rates like 250, 500, 1000, more so on 500, 1000, but still there. On those high rates, if you don't have the right RC link, you could be generating really sharp feed forward spikes.
Yep.
Those feed forward, as you know, will be put right into the PID sum, and from the PID sum into the motor SIGs. So you'll hear it. You'll probably hear it like a clicking sound. You'll see everything looks kind of good. If you look at your D term or your P term or whatever, even the gyro, you might notice spikes. But mostly, for you to see something on the gyro, it has to cause the motors to actually make the copter move and do that, right? Right, because your gyro is the first thing that's measured. Then your PID terms, P, I, and D, are going to be measured from the gyro and the set point. So it's the quality of the RC signal there and the feed forward that's going to get into the system. Look at the PID sum, because that's where you're going to see the spikes, and look at your feed forward signal.
That makes sense.
It'll be blatantly clear. I wish I had an example here. Yeah. Now that's the high rates. On the low rates, there's less to worry about. So if you're running Crossfire, you won't typically get those really sharp problems. The problem you face with the low rates is just that it's slow, and if you don't have a lot of smoothing, your P term will be pulsy. But those pulses may not necessarily cause a big issue. They're not quite as sharp. They're not quite as they don't result in really big spikes in the down in the motor sigs.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. One other thing, I mean, that's common knowledge, but for people new to the hobby, keep in mind that you turn your global, what is it called, ADC?
ADC filter.
Right, thank you, in your remote off, because that smoothens things and makes tuning worse.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Most people forget this.
Yeah, so there is I guess it's a filter that's set up in most radios called an ADC filter. I guess that's analog to digital conversion filter. So it's some kind of a filter that takes that stare and makes it more, it connects the point. Am I right? Somebody tell me if I'm wrong or not.
Yeah, you're right.
You're right.
Instead of getting a staircase, you'd get like connecting the points like this, right?
Yes.
Right. Now, what's weird is, in essence, an ADC filter kind of smooths out that RC signal, but Betaflight is not set up to deal with it well. Like, it prefers to have the input as the stair. You'd have to dig back this in the discussions on this, but I often wonder to myself, why wouldn't it be better to have the ADC on? In any case, I don't know if the ADC filter necessarily results in any major spikes in the signal. I don't think it's, somebody tell me. I don't know. What is the problem with that
extra delay maybe on the radio?
Yes, I think because Betaflight already does the job about the jittering and the smoothing.
Right. So
you will add some delay.
Add some delay. Okay. I wasn't sure if maybe the jitter issue that you gets magnified from it. I don't know.
Not sure.
But it's important to keep in mind. So let's be clear about that, because I know that lots of people may not know. In your radio, it's under hardware, I believe, right? I could be wrong. It's under hardware on an OpenTX or an EdgeTX radio. You're going to scroll down and you'll see something called ADC filter. Capital letters, ADC. And it's just a little checkbox. You want to have that checkbox off. That's all. Yeah.
Timon add a question into the chat.
I see. Timon asks, I don't know if you can hear me. Should I retune all tuning process if I change the RC link presets? Oh, the short answer is no. So, because remember, everything that's happening on the RC prelink, let me see if I can, this is time on the, starting time 0 to whatever, okay? Here's what happens. You move your sticks. This is your radio here. The signal gets sent through the airways, comes into Betaflight as a raw signal. Then we apply smoothing to it. And that set point that's smoothed then is computed with the gyro to create the PIDs. So your PID controller is happening at this level. In essence, it doesn't matter what's happening here. It changes the delay, but it doesn't matter too much. But it's true, as I said, that if you were using, say, Crossfire 50 Hertz, and your P term has these big pulses in it, it could have some impact on the PIDs. But I would say the short answer to your question is you shouldn't have the retune, no. It's 12:42. No matter how often I promise myself 1 hour, I go longer than an hour, then I got lots more to edit. But I never know where these are going to go, you know. In the beginning, I have an intention of trying to tune, but I think it's almost impossible to get through a full tune. So I won't be doing that in the future. I won't be saying, bring your drone, let's tune it. I might do it if I'm on, maybe when, for once in a while I'll tune a drone here and just push through, right? But to do that, I think the problem is that people have too many questions. That's good, right? You should have those questions. And so it's best that it just flows organically, I think, and I let the people decide what's kind of important, right? So I think it was pretty good that we had this good little discussion about RC.
Definitely.
After tuning and doing this for years, I feel like in my mind I'm repeating myself, but I forget that lots of people are new to this and they may not have seen this video and they may not have seen that video from Mark Spatz, et cetera, et cetera. So, it's not a bad idea to revisit some of this stuff. And even when I look at it, there's not many people anymore out there that are doing the kind of thing that Mark used to do,
No.
I don't know of anybody who's picked up that baton and is kind of following that. Like anybody new to the hobby, for example, won't have a background in filter delay and they won't get it. But when Mark Spatz started his videos, man, he went deep in depth on that stuff. And people won't see those videos because they're kind of either because the YouTube algorithm won't bring them up
Yeah,
front.
they get buried.
Yeah, they get buried. But there's still a lot of great info in there. Mark,
Yeah, I learn a lot. Like,
yeah, me
thanks to
too.
his
Like
video.
Mark was really the guy. Like I think Bardwell did a lot of that in the past, but then really Mark was the one who dug into that
Yes.
stuff in a way that we hadn't seen in a long
Yeah.
time. And
Mark is an engineer, so he knows how to deep dive that and is
yeah,
still able to actually explain things, which is a good thing. But what I usually do is I go to Mark's YouTube channel and then go to his videos and just look for ages for a topic which might interest me. And